while my daughter-in-law was fighting for her life in a hospital bed, gasping for every shallow breath. My own son was miles away, laughing and dancing with someone else. Someone young, carefree, someone who didn't know she existed, or maybe didn't care. And what made it worse? He had the audacity to post it online, tagging his friends, sharing his joy while she lay there helpless, hooked to machines I had grown to hate. I watched that photo, frozen, my heart shattering into pieces, and I knew in that moment, my son's betrayal wasn't just shocking, it was unforgivable. Dear friends, before we go further into this story, my heart is opening up to you. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Your support allows stories like this to be heard. And drop a comment telling me which city or state you're listening from. It warms my heart to know how far my voice reaches. Now settle in, make yourself comfortable, because the real story is about to unfold. I never thought I'd see the day when my own son would betray his wife while I was watching helplessly. But here I am, standing in the airport, suitcase in hand, feeling like the air itself is trying to suffocate me with its weight. The smell of roasted coffee mingled with the exhaust of taxis and the faint perfume of hurried travelers, but I hardly noticed. My chest felt like it had been compressed by a vice, a heavy, icy knot that refused to untangle. I had flown down without warning, without a single call to Sterling, my 35-year-old son, or even a hint to my daughter-in-law, Vita. I didn't need permission. I just needed to know she was safe. That was my motherly instinct, that unshakable sixth sense that told me something is wrong. In my tote bag were small treasures, 2 jars of homemade elderberry preserves, dark, tart, healing the kind Vita loved as a child, and a soft, plush teddy bear, silly perhaps, but comforting. My mind raced back to our last conversation. Her voice, once full and warm, had sounded thin, fractured, like a candle flickering against a storm. That tiny, tremulous whisper had haunted me for days. The airport's glass doors swung open, and I was swallowed by the thick southern air, humid and heavy against my skin. My phone buzzed silently in my coat pocket. Sterling hadn't answered any of my calls for 3 days. Vita had vanished from messages even longer. My hands trembled not from fear, but from a cold, simmering anger I didn't yet name. I climbed into an Uber, the tires humming over asphalt, and tried to steady myself. The city unfurled outside the window, brick buildings, bustling streets, the smell of street food mingling with exhaust, a faint metallic tang in the air. But none of it reached me. My mind only saw one thing: Vita alone, in danger, and my son, somewhere else, probably careless, probably oblivious. 40 minutes later, I arrived at the condo. My gift to them 3 years ago, meant to be a sanctuary for a young couple starting their life together. A foundation of brick, space, and security, my hard-earned love made tangible. I pressed my hand to the heavy wooden door, hesitating for the first time. Something felt off. The door was slightly ajar, a subtle, sinister sign that everything inside had shifted. Pushing it open, I was hit with a stench that clawed at my nose. Stale tobacco smoke, sour wine turned to vinegar, neglect in every corner. Boots lay scattered on the hallway floor, a tipped-over plant pot, the wallpaper scuffed and peeling. My son, who once loved the smell of home-baked bread and clean sheets, had left a trail of chaos instead. A neighbor appeared behind me, an elderly woman in a faded housecoat. Her eyes widened, a mixture of pity and hesitation. "Honey, I don't know where your son is. The ambulance took Vita a few days ago. She didn't look conscious. Nobody's been back since." My heart dropped. The world tilted. I don't remember the cab ride. I don't remember running into the hospital. All I knew was ICU now, immediately. The ER was chaos in slow motion. The smell of bleach, the antiseptic sting in my nostrils, the hushed footsteps of nurses, the mechanical beeping that felt like a countdown. I demanded her location, every syllable sharp, slicing through the indifferent noise of the ward. And then I saw her, Vita, my daughter-in-law, entangled in wires, tubes, and beeping machines, pale and fragile as porcelain. Alone. Abandoned. The doctor's words dropped into me like a hammer. Extreme dehydration, high fever. She hasn't eaten properly in 2 weeks. If the neighbors hadn't called 911, she wouldn't have made it. And where was Sterling? Cruising the city in the luxurious SUV I had bought him, laughing, partying, two women in the passenger seats. Oblivious. A son, a husband, a man who had forgotten what it meant to care. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I felt clarity, lethal and cold. My hands, steady, called the police. I reported the car stolen. And in that moment, the first move of my silent, calculated revenge had begun. The fluorescent hospital lights flickered above as I sat by Vita's bed. Each shallow breath she took was synced with the beeping of the monitors, a rhythm that felt almost like a countdown. I brushed a stray strand of her hair from her forehead, my fingers trembling not from fear, but from the fury simmering inside me. How could Sterling let this happen? How could he abandon her in her weakest hour? I wanted to scream at the injustice, but I held myself back. Anger, I realized, was only useful if it could be sharp and precise. I left the hospital for a few hours to gather my thoughts, needing distance to think clearly, and returned to the condo that had once been Sterling's pride and Vita's safe haven. The silence of the building was deafening. Each step I took up the stairs echoed ominously, like the world itself was warning me. Inside the apartment, chaos reigned. Coffee cups with dried rings, stacks of unopened mail, remnants of takeout, and scattered clothing gave the room a haunted, abandoned feeling. But what made my stomach twist was the pile of letters, bills, and receipts stacked haphazardly on the kitchen counter. I picked one up and froze. It was a luxury hotel bill, the dates overlapping with Vita's illness, and scribbled in the memo line were two unfamiliar names. My chest tightened. I opened a kitchen drawer almost by instinct and found something even more damning, a diary, pages torn and crumpled, Vita's handwriting unmistakable. My hands shook as I read her words. He left me alone for 3 days. No food, no care. I feel invisible. I can't believe I trusted him. I thought love meant protection. I'm scared and weak, and yet I can't even ask for help. Tears burned my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Each word was a knife twisting deeper. But the final blow came when I found a series of photographs tucked inside the pages. Sterling with other women, laughing and carefree, while Vita suffered alone. I could almost hear her pain screaming from the images. My fury didn't manifest in tears or shouting. Instead, a cold, focused fire ignited inside me, a fire for justice, precision, and revenge. Sterling had no idea that his recklessness would be documented, remembered, and used against him. I began gathering everything carefully. Each photo, each receipt, every page of the diary, I documented it all. The condo became a crime scene of betrayal, every detail a testament to the callousness he had shown. Receipts, screenshots, hotel bills, even messages on his phone that he had thought were deleted, they all went into a folder I labeled, deliberately and methodically, evidence. I stayed there until midnight, moving through the apartment like a shadow, cataloging everything. It felt surreal, walking through the chaos of someone else's cruelty, and yet finding a clarity I had never felt before. Every corner held a secret, every drawer a lie. Sterling's betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was deliberate, thoughtless, and reckless. Finally exhausted, I returned to the hospital. Vita's hand was cold, but fragilely warm as I held it. Her eyes fluttered open briefly, and she whispered, almost inaudibly, "Mom." I didn't correct her. Let her believe she was safe for now. Let her believe the world hadn't turned against her completely. Because in truth, the world was about to turn, just not against her, but against him. As I sat there through the night, staring at the monitors, my mind was a storm of strategies, timelines, and possibilities. Sterling had underestimated the depth of his betrayal, and now, unknowingly, he had triggered a force he could never stop. The diary, the photos, the receipts, they weren't just proof. They were the beginning of his reckoning. By dawn, I had a plan forming in my mind. It wasn't about anger or confrontation. It was about patience, precision, and impact. Sterling would pay for what he did, not in fleeting punishment, but in a way that would strip him of the comfort he had taken for granted. Every lie he had told, every neglectful moment, every betrayal, it would all return to him. The apartment, once a place of casual disregard, now felt like a map of his sins, each piece of evidence a coordinate leading to his downfall. And as I left Vita's side that morning, I promised myself one thing: he would regret every moment of cruelty, and I would make sure of it. Sterling didn't notice at first. Life carried on for him as usual: late mornings, expensive coffees, careless laughter with friends he barely remembered the names of. But I knew he was walking on a thin line, one that I had quietly mapped out. The diary, the photos, the receipts, they were more than just evidence. They were instruments of revelation, slowly tightening around him like a noose he could not see. I began with small, almost invisible moves. A misplaced file here, an accidentally forwarded message there. Friends of Sterling started receiving curious calls, gentle, curious, probing questions about hotel stays, dinner dates, and meetings they didn't remember attending. Sterling laughed it off when I casually mentioned that someone might have mistaken his name in a conversation. But his laughter was brittle. I saw it crack, just slightly, in private moments. Then came the messages. Carefully timed, cryptic, anonymous. A hotel receptionist confirming dates Sterling had tried to hide. A mutual acquaintance asking if he remembered a fun night last month. Sterling's calm demeanor began to falter. He wasn't aware of the source yet, but the tension was there, invisible, gnawing. At the same time, I kept Vita's care my focus. She was slowly recovering, her spirit brightening in small increments. I never left her side for long. But even in those brief absences, I made sure Sterling felt a growing unease. Subtle hints, unexplained notes, slightly off timings, and the occasional, forgotten phone call that seemed to implicate him. Every piece of evidence was strategically placed to make him second-guess reality itself. One evening, Sterling called me unexpectedly. His voice, usually smooth and confident, carried an edge of suspicion. "Laura, have you been going through my things?" I laughed softly, deliberately casual. Why would I do that? I don't even have the time. My tone, light and airy, was designed to disarm him. Yet I could hear the tension in his breath, the unease settling in. But the real pressure began when the first of his friends confronted him. I had anonymously sent messages to a few of his closest companions, carefully hinting at inconsistencies in his stories. The confrontation was subtle, polite at first, but it shook him. Sterling's mask of confidence began to crack. The man who thought he controlled every room, every conversation, every narrative, was now questioning himself, even when no one accused him directly. At home, I started leaving subtle reminders of his actions, tiny, almost laughable details that made him pause. A receipt left on the counter, a photo placed just slightly askew, a folded note with a date he thought he had erased from memory. Each small nudge was deliberate, calculated. He didn't know it yet, but the walls of his comfortable life were beginning to close in. Meanwhile, I watched from the shadows, meticulously charting every reaction, every twitch of irritation, every flinch at a whispered rumor. Sterling had underestimated me. He had underestimated Vita's strength, and he had underestimated the power of calculated revenge. One night, I finally saw him falter completely. A friend casually mentioned a name from a hotel receipt, expecting nothing, and Sterling froze mid-sentence. His eyes started around the room, searching, confused, vulnerable. That moment, that split second of realization, was the confirmation I needed. The first ripple had formed. The tide of reckoning had begun. And from that moment onward, I knew the dance had started. Sterling's life, once smooth and unshakable, was now a maze I had created. He would stumble, he would doubt, and slowly, ever so slowly, he would pay for every act of cruelty he had inflicted on Vita. But the best part? He wouldn't see it coming. Every step, every move, was carefully hidden beneath the guise of normalcy. Sterling had no idea that the web I was weaving was already tightening around him. And when it finally snapped, the consequences would be devastating and irreversible. Sterling's world, once smooth and untouchable, began to wobble on its foundation. The subtle nudges I had placed, the anonymous messages, the misdirected reminders, the quiet hints dropped to his friends were now bearing fruit. The confident, untouchable man everyone admired was starting to falter, and it was mesmerizing to watch. It started with small things. A friend who once laughed at his jokes hesitated. A colleague avoided eye contact during meetings. One by one, people he considered allies began treating him differently. Sterling would try to laugh it off, brushing away their unease with practice charm, but the cracks in his armor were widening. Then came the direct confrontations. A mutual friend, carefully tipped off by me, casually asked about a dinner Sterling had claimed never happened. Sterling, wasn't that dinner last month at La Belle? You were with someone, right? The question was innocent enough for the unprepared, but Sterling froze. His carefully crafted story collapsed in an instant, leaving him flustered and stumbling for words. I watched from a distance, keeping my calm, but inside, every heartbeat sang with satisfaction. Each reaction was a confirmation that my plan was working. Sterling's arrogance was cracking, and he had no idea who was behind it. I also started leaving more deliberate reminders at home. A scarf on the chair, a receipt carefully placed in his favorite book, a photo casually left on the table. Each item was designed to make him question his memory, his actions, even his sense of reality. The anxiety in his eyes was deliciously subtle but unmistakable. Then came the night of the party, a gathering Sterling had been hosting to flaunt his social power. I attended under the guise of casual presence, observing every detail. The whispers started almost immediately. Questions about where he had been, hints about stories that didn't match, friends exchanging glances he couldn't interpret. Sterling tried to maintain control, but every attempt was met with subtle resistance. His charm, once untouchable, was failing him. By the end of the night, Sterling was visibly shaken. He had spent hours trying to untangle conversations, to reassert his dominance, but every step only seemed to trap him further. The perfect image he had maintained for years was crumbling, piece by piece. And through it all, I remained calm, collected, almost invisible in the crowd. Vita's well-being was still my priority, but watching Sterling unravel slowly, meticulously, was a thrill I couldn't hide. Every move he made, every lie he tried to spin, only tightened the net I had woven. And I knew deep down that the true reckoning was only just beginning. Sterling had no idea that the days ahead would strip away every ounce of control he thought he possessed, leaving him exposed, vulnerable, and finally facing the consequences of his actions. Sterling had finally realized something was off. The subtle hints, the misplaced items, the questions from friends and colleagues, all of it had pierced the veil of his control. For the first time in years, he felt vulnerable. And when Sterling felt vulnerable, he became dangerous. It started with him observing me, though he wouldn't admit it. Every glance I threw, every casual remark, seemed to trigger a flicker of suspicion in his eyes. I could see it when he thought I wasn't looking, the way he tightened his jaw, the small shifts in his posture, the guarded tone when he spoke to others. Sterling had begun hunting for a source, desperately trying to identify who was orchestrating his unraveling. He started checking his phone obsessively, going through emails and messages with meticulous precision. He questioned friends, colleagues, even casual acquaintances, looking for inconsistencies, looking for anyone who might have crossed him. And every time, I remained 2 steps ahead, always careful, always unnoticed. The tension between us grew with every passing day. I could feel it when our paths crossed, Sterling's gaze lingering a moment too long, sharp and calculating. He didn't know what I knew, but he knew something was coming, and that uncertainty was eating at him. Meanwhile, I continued my quiet manipulation. A half-forgotten note here, a casual mention of events there, small things that seemed accidental but were carefully timed. Sterling began questioning his memory, doubting the very reality he had always relied on. His confidence, once unshakable, was eroding. At work, the cracks became more visible. He snapped at minor issues, his judgment clouded, colleagues whispering about the change in him. Friends began avoiding the unpredictability, unsure when Sterling would lash out or crumble under pressure. The once celebrated man was becoming a shadow of himself. And yet, through it all, I never lost sight of the endgame. The ultimate revelation, the point where Sterling would realize not just that he had been outmaneuvered, but who had outmaneuvered him. That moment would be the culmination of weeks of careful planning, patience, and observation. Every move he made now was a step closer to his own undoing, and I had front row seats to the spectacle. The thrill was undeniable. Watching Sterling hunt blindly, grasping for control, knowing the truth was always just out of his reach, it was intoxicating. And I knew deep down that when the final act unfolded, there would be no redemption, no escape. Only the stark reality of what he had done and the consequences he could no longer deny. Sterling's desperation had reached a fever pitch. Every corner he turned, every phone call he made, every interaction was driven by a single thought: regain control. He didn't yet understand the extent of what had been done, nor the layers of planning that had ensnared him. It started with subtle sabotage. A package he thought had been delivered accidentally vanished. His credit cards, once instantly accessible, were declined in rapid succession. Friends who had once shielded him from consequences were now distant or silent. He was running blind, and every instinct told him to strike, to fight, to claw back what he thought was rightfully his. I watched from the sidelines, keeping my distance, but always aware of his moves. And then came the moment I had been waiting for. Sterling walked into the hospital lobby, the same place he had confronted me days ago, his chest heaving, eyes wild with fury and confusion. But this time, it wasn't just anger in his gaze. It was fear, the recognition that he had underestimated the very person he called mother. "You, what have you done?" he hissed, voice trembling as he scanned the room. He didn't need to ask who had orchestrated this. The answer was in my calm posture, in the quiet authority that radiated from every movement I made. "Everything you ever counted on. It's gone," I said quietly, almost kindly, though my words were edged with steel. "The car is sold. The apartment belongs to Veda. Your money? Already redirected to her care. Your reputation? Collapsed. And you are nothing without the choices I've removed from you." Sterling's knees buckled slightly. He staggered, clinging to a nearby chair. His mind raced, trying to calculate escape, trying to find some loophole, some justification. But there were none. Every path he had relied on, every lifeline he thought existed, had been strategically dismantled. You can't do this." "You're my mother," he screamed, voice breaking, fingers trembling. "I'm your son. You can't leave me with nothing." I stepped closer, deliberately slow, letting my presence fill the room. "I'm your mother, and I have loved you, but I will not let you destroy anyone else to satisfy your selfishness. Veda is alive because I acted. You almost killed her. And now, Sterling, you will face the consequences of your actions. Alone." He sank to the floor, defeated but still defiant, fists pounding the linoleum as if he could physically reverse the past. I'll make it right. I'll get her back, I swear. I'll. You'll do nothing," I interrupted, "because there is nothing left for you to do. You had your chance. You threw it away. Every decision, every lie, every cruelty, now it's your responsibility to bear alone." And then came the final blow. I handed him a copy of the documents, the deed of gift to Veda, the proof of the car sale, the allocation of funds for her treatment. Each page landed with a weight that made his eyes widen in terror. He could see it, read it, but could not change it. "I did everything I could to protect her," I said, voice low, controlled, unwavering. "And I will continue to protect her, Sterling. From now on, you are powerless. Not because I want vengeance, but because justice finally has a face and it's not yours." Sterling slumped against the wall, chest heaving, eyes darting around the empty lobby, looking for an escape that did not exist. And for the first time, I saw the full measure of what had been achieved. The man who had once believed himself untouchable, whose ego had been fueled by privilege and disregard, had nothing. No car, no apartment, no money, no control. Only the raw truth of his actions and the certainty that he could not undo them. I turned away, heading toward the elevator, feeling a rare and unshakable satisfaction. Sterling would live, yes, but he would live knowing he had been exposed, stripped bare, and powerless. And for once, that was enough. As the elevator doors closed behind me, I could hear him calling my name, pleading, screaming, bargaining, but it fell on ears that no longer wavered. The storm had passed, and in its wake, only clarity remained. The days that followed were a strange mixture of calm and tension. The storm that Sterling had brought into our lives had finally passed, but its aftermath was still palpable. Veda's health began to stabilize, the doctors noting steady improvement. Her once weak pulse now carried a rhythm of life that felt almost defiant, a silent declaration that she had survived not by chance, but by the will of those who truly cared for her. I spent hours by her bedside, holding her hand, whispering reminders that she was safe. Each day, she grew stronger, her eyes regaining the spark that Sterling had tried to extinguish. I could see the gratitude, but also the fear, lingering in her gaze, a memory of how close the world had come to taking her away. Meanwhile, Sterling's downfall was a slow, public unraveling. Word of his financial mismanagement, his failed schemes, and his cruelty toward Veda spread among family and friends. No one offered him help. No one sought to defend him. His phone calls went unanswered, messages ignored. The network of protection he had once relied on crumbled like sand slipping through desperate fingers. He attempted to regain control, sending messages, showing up unannounced, pleading for forgiveness, but I had already made my decision. Veda would not be endangered again. I refused to allow the past to repeat itself. Sterling's entitlement had ended, his arrogance met its match. And then came the quiet victories, small but profound. Veda laughed again for the first time, a sound so pure it cut through the tension in the house like sunlight piercing storm clouds. She walked a few steps without support, the determination in her movements speaking louder than words ever could. Every moment of progress was a silent rebuke to Sterling, a reminder that life, resilience, and care could overcome the most calculated malice. I took deliberate steps to ensure the future. Veda's finances were secured, her safety guaranteed, and the legal measures that prevented Sterling from approaching her without oversight were in place. Every precaution was meticulously documented, a fortress of protection built not from fear, but from love and foresight. By the end of the week, Veda could sit upright in her chair, reading quietly, a soft smile on her lips. She reached for my hand and squeezed it gently. "Thank you for everything," she whispered. And in that simple acknowledgement, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Sterling, on the other hand, remained a shadow on the periphery, a man who had learned, too late, that cruelty and entitlement do not withstand the power of careful action and unwavering love. His lessons were hard, personal, and permanent. And I allowed him to live with them, knowing he had no means to undo the consequences of his own choices. In the silence that followed, the house felt lighter. The tension had dissolved, replaced by a quiet resilience. Life would continue, not as it had been, but as it should be: safe, measured, and built on the foundation of those who genuinely cared. And as Veda's laughter grew stronger each day, I knew that we had not just survived. We had triumphed. Weeks passed, and Sterling's world continued to crumble. Word of his recklessness, manipulation, and attempts to harm Veda reached far beyond the family circle. Friends distanced themselves, business partners severed ties, and the social reputation he had clung to so desperately evaporated. The man who once projected confidence and control was now seen as reckless, cruel, and utterly isolated. I received a formal notice from the authorities confirming that legal action had been taken. Restraining orders, financial audits, and a court-mandated review ensured that Sterling could no longer pose a threat to Veda. He had underestimated the reach of consequences, the power of preparation, and the resilience of those he sought to harm. Meanwhile, Veda blossomed in ways that surprised even her. She returned to small routines she had abandoned, reading in the garden, taking walks, laughing freely with friends. The fear that had shadowed her life lifted, replaced with confidence and a cautious optimism. She spoke of the future in terms that radiated hope: travel, education, small business ventures, all things Sterling had tried to belittle. I watched silently, proud and relieved. Every smile she shared, every moment of normalcy regained, felt like a small victory against the darkness that had once threatened to engulf her life. Sterling, I realized, had not just failed in his attempts to control her, he had inadvertently revealed the true strength of her character and mine. Socially, Sterling faced public embarrassment. The community, previously oblivious to his cruelty, now openly discussed his actions. Mutual acquaintances avoided him, rumors of his misdeeds spreading faster than he could respond. Every attempt at explanation or apology only reinforced his culpability. His arrogance, once his armor, had become his exposure. Yet, the most satisfying aspect of his downfall was silent and personal. Sterling had lost what he could never replace: trust, respect, and influence. His manipulations, lies, and threats had left him alone, stripped of the power he once wielded so carelessly. In contrast, our bond grew stronger. Veda's gratitude extended beyond words. It was visible in her confidence, in her laughter, in the ease with which she navigated daily life. I had protected her, yes, but she had survived and thrived through her own courage. Together, we had created a shield that no arrogance, cruelty, or entitlement could penetrate. And Sterling? He lingered only as a memory, a cautionary tale of what happens when greed and malice meet vigilance and love. His attempts to return were met with indifference, his threats dissolved in the face of well-laid safeguards, and his presence became irrelevant. Life continued, peaceful and steady, a testament to what careful action and unwavering resolve could achieve. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to breathe fully. The tension had lifted, replaced by clarity. Veda's laughter, her regained independence, and the knowledge that she was safe brought a sense of profound relief. The storm had passed, and the world, at least our world, felt whole again. Months had passed since Sterling's fall from grace. The tension, fear, and uncertainty that had once dominated our lives were now distant memories, replaced by routine, laughter, and small victories. The air felt lighter, the world kinder, as though life itself was breathing a sigh of relief. Veda had fully reclaimed her independence. She explored new hobbies, enrolled in courses she had dreamed of but postponed, and reconnected with friends whose support had been unwavering. Her confidence was palpable not just in how she moved, spoke, or smiled, but in the quiet strength she radiated. Every day, she reminded me why I had fought so fiercely to protect her. Sterling, by contrast, remained a cautionary shadow. His social isolation, legal troubles, and public disgrace had left him powerless. Every attempt to re-enter our lives was met with firm boundaries and indifference. The man who once thought he could control everything had discovered that cruelty and arrogance ultimately led only to ruin. Yet, as satisfying as his downfall was, it no longer held my attention. The world I chose to focus on was one of growth, resilience, and peace. Veda's laughter as she shared stories of her day, the way she navigated challenges with renewed confidence, and the simple, quiet moments of joy became the markers of our reality. Looking back, I realized the storm had taught us more than just survival. It had revealed the depths of human resilience, the importance of vigilance, and the undeniable strength of love and care. Veda had been the center of my protection, but the experience had shaped me as well, teaching patience, strategic thinking, and the quiet satisfaction of justice served. In the end, Life returned to a rhythm of normalcy, punctuated with moments of triumph and reflection. Sterling became a distant memory, a lesson in humility and accountability. And as Veda walked forward with her head held high, I knew that the past, though painful, had forged a future brighter than either of us could have imagined. Our lives were no longer defined by fear or manipulation. Instead, they were shaped by courage, perseverance, and the unshakable belief that no darkness, no matter how threatening, could endure against truth, care, and resolve. And so, with the storm behind us and the path ahead clear, we stepped forward, not in fear, not in caution, but in full confidence that life, at its core, rewards those who stand firm in justice and compassion. Friends, life sometimes tests us in ways we never imagined. Protecting the people we love, standing up to betrayal, and finding strength in impossible moments. It's never easy, but it's always worth it. Now I want to hear from you. If you were in my shoes, would you have taken the same steps, or would you have handled Sterling differently? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's discuss how we confront betrayal, protect our loved ones, and fight for justice. And remember, no matter how dark the situation may seem, courage, clarity, and care can change the outcome. Your voice matters. Let me know what you would do.